Welcome to The Shadow Side with Safrianna, the podcast where we illuminate what others too often keep hidden in the dark. I'm your host, Safrianna Luna, and I believe that true growth and healing happen when we're brave enough to explore the shadows. As you listen, may you find greater understanding and awareness around your personal stories and collective trends. Take care of yourself, and let's dive in. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of The Shadow Side with Safrianna. I am Safrianna Luna, and as always, it is a pleasure to be here talking to you about things that need to be talked about. That is why I created this program and why I continue to invite on guests that are speaking up and doing the work, the activism, the creating more health, the teaching boundaries, all kinds of things like that. And today I am so delighted to be joined by Caroline and Natalie from Hartley House. Hartley House being the nonprofit agency where I first did my therapy internship and got my first job as a therapist. And it is just an absolutely incredible organization. I cannot say enough good things about it. So I cannot wait to invite these beautiful people to speak to us today about all kinds of things, including domestic and intimate partner violence and what abuse looks like in today's modern world. So thank you so much to the both of you for being here. It is a delight. And Caroline, if you'd be so kind as to introduce yourself.
Absolutely. And before I do that, I just want to say thank you so much for inviting Hartley House on the podcast. We truly appreciate it. And just want everyone to know that we are here for survivors who live, work, or go to school in Frederick County. So very, very much appreciated that you reached out to us and that it's kind of a full circle moment for you as well.
Absolutely.
But my name is Caroline Data. My pronouns are she, her, and I've been working with Hartley House for coming up on 4 years in October. I started out as their community engagement and prevention coordinator, and now I'm their community engagement and prevention lead. It's a mouthful, but basically what I do is train individuals who live, work, or go to school in Frederick County on Hartley House, all of the support services we offer to individuals for free, which I'll talk more about during this conversation, and also work with those who may come in contact with victims and survivors on how to best work with individuals to hopefully not re-traumatize individuals and things of that nature. So working a lot with social service agents, nurses, doctors, law enforcement, really anyone who may come in contact with victims and survivors while they're out doing their work.
Thank you. Such an important mission. And, that is why I created this podcast, is because a lot of times we just don't talk about things. And so there's no prevention because there's no knowledge, right? Oh, so important. So thank you for all that you do. And just for anyone who's listening that is global or not local, Frederick, Maryland is where Hartley House is. I do know Hartley House does help people connect with other agencies that do cover these things. So I just want to put that out there as we're getting started. If you're like, oh my gosh, this is me and I need help, but I'm not in Frederick County, Maryland, Hartley House is an incredible agency that will help you find resources.
Yes, thank you so much, Safrianna, for bringing that up. Yes, if you live somewhere outside of Frederick County, Maryland, you are absolutely welcome to call our 24/7 hotline number, and our hotline workers are amazing. They'll get you connected to a resource local to your area or help you if that's not an option.
Yeah.
You want to make sure that your location is not a barrier to leaving an unsafe situation.
Yes, it's huge. Thank you. So Natalie, would you be so kind as to introduce yourself?
Yes, of course. And just to echo Caroline, thank you so much for having us on. It's a huge pleasure. So I'm Natalie Feit. I use she, her pronouns. I am a Bachelor of Arts student getting my major in social work at Hood College, and I'm currently the community engagement intern at Hartley House. So I'm going around with Caroline to do a bunch of trainings, and we are currently getting ready to start our next cohort of survivor speakers tomorrow. So that's really exciting. We've been working on that all year. So yeah, I'm just really excited to be here.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And, this is just, I love that Hartley House offers these opportunities because I was that intern too at one point, and it is just such an incredible place to learn and grow. So I'm so glad that you're connected in. And just in case you don't know me, as I said, I'm Safrianna Luna, the Queer Spirit Guide. I am a licensed clinical therapist, as well as a guide, an author, a speaker, a podcaster. I just kind of do whatever I can to spread the word about all of these different things that need to be spoken on. So I actually have done some recent episodes where I've talked about domestic violence with the lens of what's happening in our world right now and just how much violence there is. And that is because it continues to perpetuate at the individual level and it continues to be normalized. So let's just hop in with the main thing that Hartley House really serves, which is specifically intimate partner violence, which some people call, it's a form of domestic violence. It's like a subcategory. So how would you define intimate partner violence and domestic violence just for people who have maybe they've never heard of it as violence before? It's just been something normalized in their everyday life.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such an amazing question. I think a lot of people, we tend to use both words, domestic violence and intimate partner violence. The reason being is because a lot of people easily recognize the term domestic violence. And so we're hoping to grab people's attention to say, okay, hey, this is the term you may best know. But we also work with individuals in intimate partner violence situations as well, right? And the reason why we try to go from domestic violence to the term intimate partner violence is because we want people to know that you do not need to be living in the same household or apartment or any type of living situation in order for it to be considered abuse or an abusive relationship. Here in Frederick County, Maryland, we've seen individuals as young as middle schoolers who are in violent relationships and would be considered in an intimate partner violence situation, right? So it's regardless of where somebody is living, regardless of their age as well. I think there's a big stereotype out there that we believe that intimate partner violence occurs only to people maybe in their young 20s to 30s to 40s, but that is unfortunately not true. We see people of all ages, all the way from middle school all the way up to those who are in their 80s or 90s who are in abusive situations, specifically intimate partner violence. So please know that regardless of somebody's age, somebody can be in an abusive situation. And we actually, specifically for those who are middle and high school students in Frederick County, we actually just created our youth prevention team, and they just started going into the schools this school year. So fall of 2024 and spring of 2025, where they're going to every middle and high school classroom, talking about what healthy relationships looks like, talking about what healthy boundaries looks like and healthy friendships look like. So hopefully we can prevent violence before it occurs. We can share the red flags and warning signs of what violence looks like, not just in intimate partner violence situations, but also what does an unhealthy friendship look like as well?
Yeah.
Because that can happen too. Or what does an unhealthy sibling relationship look like? It can be so many different things, right? But just allowing people or allowing students the space to think about their own boundaries, their own red flags, and then the greater red flags that we see that are associated with violence.
And can I just jump in and say that also I feel like a misconception about domestic violence or intimate partner violence is that it can just be physical. There are so many other things that it could be. It could be emotional, spiritual, financial, the list goes on. So,
yeah. It really does go on. And that's been part of what I have continued to try and educate people on is we really do just think that abuse looks physical or sexual, but it is so much more than that. And, it really, abuse gets into the root of someone's self-worth and really tears it apart.
Yes.
Makes them doubt.
And actually, in 99% of intimate partner violence cases, financial abuse occurs. And this is one of the biggest things that we see while we're out in the community is as individuals who may be on the outside and have never experienced abuse, they will ask us, well, why don't people just leave, right? If somebody's being harmed or hurt, why don't they just leave the person? But when you bring in that statistic, well, in 99% of cases, somebody's being financially abused. That brings in another layer there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a huge barrier for people, especially I know as you're talking about, the greater cultural context that's going on as inflation rises, as cost of living expenses get higher and higher. It is so much harder for a single person to live on just their own income. And we
Mm-hmm.
see abusers will use that to their own advantage. They will financially abuse individuals so that they literally have a barrier and they cannot leave unless there is a shelter like Hartley House in place for individuals, right? So at Hartley House, we want to make sure that financial abuse is not a barrier for someone. So we have an emergency shelter, but we also have case managers that work with individuals to help them with employment opportunities, gathering housing opportunities that are in their financial, situation that would work with their financial barriers at play. Because again, we want to make sure that financial abuse is not a reason why somebody can't leave. But the reality is, it is a growing barrier for people. And the larger economic context of the US absolutely plays a huge role in whether or not people feel like they can or cannot leave an abusive situation.
Yeah.
Like, so I was working as a case manager in Montgomery County in Maryland. And as an advocate and case manager, I had a survivor who I was working with who did not realize that her abuser actually opened up a credit card in her name and ruined her credit score. So when it was time and she had made all of these steps and was ready to leave the situation, well, she was having a really hard time finding an apartment. I mean, even just going to an apartment, landlords want a credit score, right?
Yep.
So that absolutely has huge barriers for people. And so if we are able to advocate on behalf of someone and talk with a landlord and say, hey, look, this is the situation and we need to help this individual, right? We're going to do our best to do that because that is, again, a main reason why people can't leave an abusive relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. And that economic piece, I know, is why so many people are just in fear all the time right now. And we have to do something to help. And I'm so thankful that there are resources like this, like Hartley House, to help people understand that deeper impact, because it pervades every part of our society right now. And again, like I said, without the awareness, it just kind of continues and the cycle continues. And I'll just share a little bit. When I first started my internship at Hartley House and went through all of the training, I realized that I was in an intimate partner violence situation, and that not just one, but all categories were being met. And it blew my mind because I was like, oh, well, we got through the physical part of the abuse. Like, it's fine now. He got better. He maybe got better on one level, but then there were all these deeper levels. And without that knowledge and education, like, it just mirrored my own childhood. It just mirrored my parents' dynamics. So I just thought it was normal. And that is the story of so many people I've worked with. And it's such a sad and heartbreaking story. And so the more that we can talk about it and bring awareness to it, the better, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And this is actually a great point where I would love to bring up the cycle of violence.
Yeah.
So not always, but often we see that there is a cycle of violence that the perpetrator is either knowingly or unknowingly doing that often is another reason why survivors don't leave an abusive relationship. And so that cycle often looks like the start is a honeymoon phase, right? So in the honeymoon phase, think of it as like when you're first getting into a relationship and everything is new and everything is exciting. And that's really what the honeymoon phase can look like. But in an abusive situation, it can also look like after an abusive incident, the abuser profusely apologizing for the incident or making grandiose gestures, right? Buying big gifts, or saying like, oh my goodness, we're gonna go on vacation to this place, or let's have children, like making these grandiose gestures of like, love to the survivor or the victim, right? But then unfortunately, we know that honeymoon phase doesn't last. Typically, then we go into a phase where people feel, the victim in particular, feels like they're walking on eggshells. And this is where we call it's the tension building phase, right? So the abuser is often being really nitpicky of the victim or the survivor, constantly putting them down, things of that nature. Again, like you were saying, Safriana, making them doubt their self-worth is really what we see in that tension building phase. And again, we've been told from countless victims and survivors that they felt like they were hyper vigilant, that the other shoe was going to drop at any moment, that they were constantly like just feeling anxious and on edge because they unfortunately knew that an abusive incident was coming around the corner. And that intuition is usually right. And then the final phase of the cycle of violence is an abusive incident. And it doesn't necessarily need to be a physical incident of abuse, right? It can be an emotional or financial abusive situation there as well. But it's this like big abusive moment that happens. And then right after the abusive incident, usually the abuser then showers the victim with love, or what we could refer to as love bombing, right? Just constantly saying, I love you, I'm going to get better, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. And that cycle is really confusing. And of course, victims and survivors, they want to feel love. Everyone wants to feel love, right? And so when an abuser is saying, I'm going to get better and I'm going to do this, of course, people want to believe in their partner. And that's also another reason why we see a lot of individuals not leaving abusive relationships, because they believe the best in their partner and they want to see them get better.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say, is so many times people are in love with this person and do love this person. And like you said, you want to see the best in someone. So it's just another barrier for people to leave the situation.
Yeah. And all of these barriers, I mean, I lived it. They say that it's 7 times for the average survivor to leave a situation like that. And I mean, for me, it was probably 8 or 9, honestly, because of exactly that. This cycle and that honeymoon phase feels so good to the nervous system that's used to doing the roller coaster, because it's like, oh, we're back in the good stuff. And then the crash into the bad stuff. And we can actually like get addicted to that cycle. And people don't understand the biological underlying chemical stuff that happens with all of this. And so there's no, like, just like to remind people, no shame if it takes you a while to get out. It took me almost 7 years to leave. And as a writer, I literally refer to that person as the love bomber in my writing, just so it's like completely neutral. I'm not like, people who need to know, but otherwise, like, I don't need to put that on blast for the public. So I just refer to this person as the love bomber, because that is often how this cycle gets started, is really through that love bombing.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And so I'd love to kind of dovetail into child abuse here, because that it lays the foundation for so many people to end up in these kinds of situations. And, you know, I'm just curious how Hartley House really looks at child abuse, the kinds of things that you all still support around with that.
Absolutely. And so just to bring up your point too, unfortunately, we do see, right, a lot of individuals who've experienced child abuse or even witnessed intimate partner violence in their home growing up, unfortunately, may find themselves in an intimate partner violence situation. And this has nothing to do with them choosing bad decisions, right? I think that's really important to acknowledge, because I think as a greater society, we often blame the victim. And so I just want to say that that is not what's happening here. Hartley House sees it as oftentimes it's because individuals who've experienced child abuse may not know what a healthy relationship looks like because it wasn't modeled in the home for them. Or on a biological level, we tend to want to do what we know, right? And so unfortunately, that can work against us in these situations. And again, not to blame anyone for that situation, because a child is not choosing any of this, right?
Right.
A child is just living in the situation that they've been brought into, right? But unfortunately, we can be wired to want or to feel comfort in similar situations that we've already experienced. And so that's another layer of it as well of, oh, this feels common, or this feels normal to me, or this may be the only thing that I know. And so it may be just another layer of not knowing red flags or warning signs that people may be carrying later on in life.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, Natalie, it looks like you wanted to chime in there.
No, I think you said it all perfectly. I mean, with our Survivor Speakers Bureau as well, I know that there are so many people that have experienced both. So I think it's just so common, and more people need to know that this is happening and could be kind of one of the catalysts to why it's happening as well, which I also think that's why the prevention piece is so important, stopping the cycle, nipping it at the bud, for lack of a better term.
Great.
And one of my favorite things that Hartley House does provide is also the abuser intervention program. So they also support abusers and help them to stop re-abusing, which I think is a huge piece to stopping the problem of power-based violence as a whole.
Yeah, so much of, why the cycle continues is because it's passed down from parent to child,
Yes.
from parent to child, from parent to child, and it just keeps going. So until we get really good parent education and we're stopping those parents from perpetuating the cycle so that they don't pass it on to their kids, it will continue. I am that unfortunate, my childhood laid the groundwork for me to normalize that really awful. I mean, both of my long-term adult relationships before I got into the healthy ones literally mirrored my dynamics with my mom and my dynamics with my dad. It was very, interesting and awful.
Yeah, and I'd also like to kind of go back to talking about the youth prevention team, because that is so important that we are getting this education very young, so these kids can see that in their parents and say, oh, maybe this isn't normal, and they can go on and have healthier relationships, healthier friendships, and just getting the education before it becomes normalized or a pattern for these people.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. If I'd had somebody come into my school when I was in middle school and talk about it, my whole world would have been different because somebody outside would have been acknowledging, some of what was happening. So I know we just started on child abuse, but one of the main kinds of child abuse, unfortunately, that is hugely impactful is sexual abuse. So childhood sexual abuse. And children are not listened to on the whole when they come forward about these things. And so does this outreach and prevention team talk about sexual abuse as well, or is it mainly around the dating violence and things like that?
That's a really great question. As it stands right now, it's specifically focusing on healthy relationships. They do have a component where they go into consent and what that would look like, but not more so on the lines of sexual assault prevention rather than child abuse, sexual assault prevention, if that makes sense. But I really appreciate you bringing that up and tying that into here as well. Because I also, if you're not local to Frederick County, I'm going to be, I apologize because I'm saying a lot of nonprofits in this area, but we work very closely with the Child Advocacy Center of Frederick County, and they actually do forensic examination of children who have been sexually abused. They do forensic interviewing and things of that nature, and we work very closely with them because we don't necessarily do those forensic examinations, but we do have child counselors free of charge for survivors of child abuse. Now, there's this other line as well, whereas as Hartley House employees, we are all mandated reporters for child abuse as well. So we do need to report, and usually, not always, but usually that will start an investigation with CPS if we are made aware of a child abuse incident as well. But I have to say, specifically, sorry, I'm thinking of a statistic in my head, which is why I paused. Specifically for male survivors of sexual assault, child abuse, sexual assault, I should say, it takes on average about 20 to 25 years
Wow.
to come forward because there's such a stigma like you were saying, Safriana, such a stigma for children not being believed when they share experiences that they've gone through. And then on that layer, oftentimes male survivors in general are minimized and not believed. So we see a combination of that with male survivors of childhood sexual abuse. And so knowing that Hartley House says we want to make sure that regardless of when the abuse happened, we are here to support you as well, right? So it doesn't matter if the abuse happened 10, 20, 80 years ago. We want to support you and we're here to support you. And we actually have two men's groups, specifically survivor groups for child sexual abuse, because somebody in the community said, hey, there is no men's group for this. And I know I'm not the only survivor because I have friends who have gone through this as well. And I want there to be more acknowledgement and more understanding and more of a support group there. And so that's a big deal as well. And if anyone lives in this area and wants any type of support group that isn't listed on our website, because we keep that pretty up to date, I would say if you're feeling up to it, please call our hotline and let that be known so that we can work to creating that space for you all.
And also, I just wanted to point out kind of another thing that gets in the way of children reporting. I can't remember the statistic right off the top of my head, but a lot of the time it's a trusted adult. It's a family member or it's a teacher. And, I feel like a lot of the time it is kind of told to the children, like, you can trust me, this is okay. They aren't realizing that what is going on is wrong until 20, 25 years later, where they think back to that moment and they're like, oh my gosh, that was not okay. Yeah. So I just think that that's another barrier and a reason that a lot of children feel like they're not going to be trusted.
I mean, when we literally live in a society where we normalize mostly men abusing children and other men and women, it's really hard to fight back against these things. And that is, I think, a symptom of this like mass blinders situation. It's just like people want to pull the wool over their eyes. And that's why I'm like, we have to get more in people's faces, unfortunately, because consent is key. Like I love that you're teaching about consent in the schools, because that if we just have an underlying knowledge about consent, that can fix so many problems, because that is the key with everything. But we have to get loud and kind of talk about these things in a bigger way so that people can have that shock. I'm a trauma-informed therapist, of course, but as an author, I literally just removed all of the trigger warnings out of my book. And I instead wrote to the extent that as long as we keep avoiding and trying to warn about everything we're going to talk about, and we treat ourselves like we are triggers, and that we need to keep other people safe by not talking about the awful things that have happened to us, that also perpetuates the violence. And so many of us have been taught to stay quiet, especially if you did try to come forward as a child and you got shut down. You're going to think, well, no one cares about what happens to me and I should just stay quiet because it made mom mad that I said that, or, it made whoever upset that I said this bad thing happened. And that is just, it's not stated enough, I think.
I absolutely agree with you. And to that point as well, getting parents, this training is so important, and it's definitely another dynamic that we want to bring into the youth engagement team. Not only getting faculty and teachers on board at the schools, right, so that they understand the critical role that they can play in supporting a survivor of child abuse and intimate partner violence, right? But also the parents as well, because there may be so many parents who just think, oh, that neighbor is really kind. But in reality, there can be a lot of red flags and warning signs. No, that neighbor is not kind. That neighbor has too much contact with this child, and it is inappropriate. This relationship is inappropriate. And there are red flags and warning signs that we can share with parents there, right? So anyway, I 100% hear what you're saying, Safrianna, and I absolutely agree. It takes the whole community to end abuse. if we are just looking to the survivors and victims, that's not enough. They've been through so much, and to assume that they want to share and talk about this experience is also not okay either, right? There are a lot of people who do want to share what's happened to them. There's a lot of people who will never share what's happened to them, right? And they are allowed to choose that for themselves. So the community needs to step up, right? The allies of these survivors need to step up and say, this is not appropriate. This is not okay. And we all need to be having these really difficult conversations.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
then, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to slip in there. One of the things that Hartley House does do is offer support to vicarious trauma survivors, I guess. I don't know what word just people who've experienced vicarious trauma, because even hearing and holding the stories of other people can be very deeply impactful and, not just heartbreaking, but have a physical stress response. So if you're a person who is an ally and you are supporting people who have experienced these things, you're allowed to have boundaries. You're allowed to kind of titrate and lean in and lean out and take care of yourself. And you're allowed to get support, because it does impact us when we hear these really awful things that happen between humans.
Yes, and I'm so glad you brought that up too. So at Hartley House, all of our services are free, and we support not only survivors and victims and abusers, but also what we would refer to as secondary survivors. So somebody who is supporting a survivor in their life, or somebody who has witnessed the abuse that's happened, and we will support them with counseling services. You are more than welcome to call our hotline as well, just to get more information on how to best support that person in your life, because every situation is different. But like you said, Safrianna, too, listening to these stories, especially when it's happening to somebody we love so dearly, it is really, really difficult to hear the violence that they've endured or that they're currently going through. And know that you are not alone in that frustration. It's really difficult, and we are here to support you as well.
Yeah. I love this just conversation about it taking a village, and because that's what we've lost. And I think that again is a reason that the cycles of violence are perpetuated, is because there isn't community support. Everybody's kind of isolated in their own little bubbles, and we don't talk about our family skeletons, right? Like there's this modern attitude of we don't bring it to the village for healing. We instead kind of keep everything bottled up in us until it blows and we act it out on someone else, or we become that perpetual victim that just does not ever pursue something healthy because they don't know.
Yeah. And sorry, Caroline, do you want to go first?
Go ahead.
I was going to say something I've noticed trending is just like the individualism of it all. Like you said, like people aren't in community as much anymore. And to me, that is like the key to everything. There's like a trend that I really don't like where people are like, you don't owe anybody anything. And I guess, that is true. But also, like, the community is just so important. And wouldn't you feel so much better if you were supporting those around you? I feel like you said, it's so isolating, not only to not be able to share your story with others, but also not listening to others, So I think that that's just such an important piece.
Absolutely.
And I was just to add on to that as well, and I think it could be so powerful. And I'm speaking to the allies here, you may not necessarily know the people in your life who are victims or survivors, because they may not ever share that information with you. However, that doesn't mean that what you say about other people is not being heard or listened to, right? And especially in this climate in the US, what you say on social media and what you say about people who are in the spotlight matters, right? If you are victim blaming, I'm just going to take Blake Lively, for example, because that was like recently in the news, right? With the Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively, right? Saying things about Blake Lively on social media or with your friends or whatever, and victim blaming that person, even though you're never going to have a relationship with Blake Lively. And maybe you do, I don't know. But I think most of us will probably not. Yeah, Blake Lively's probably never going to hear that. But your friends and your loved ones and your family members who have experienced what Blake Lively has gone through, or whatever celebrity has gone through, they will hear you. And if you are speaking negatively about another victim or survivor, they are probably not going to trust you, right? And that is a really key issue that we see a lot here, right? Well, I didn't feel comfortable trusting my friends or family members because of how they've reacted to other people. And the amazing thing, to leave it on a happy note or a lighter note somehow when you're talking about this, is that how you respond to survivors can actually change how their healing journey goes, right? Just saying the words, I believe you and I'm here for you, actually allows a survivor to heal quicker from that abusive situation because they are in community with people, and we're not blaming them. We're not shaming them. We're saying, I'm going to sit here and listen with you. And so to all the allies out there, how amazing that you can actually help somebody just with those 3 words, I believe you, right? Like, what power.
Yeah. I mean, I know that for sure, having experienced my own, abusive history, like coming forward and having people be like, yeah, whatever, versus, oh my gosh, I believe you, even if I can't do anything about it, right? That split right there, if people are not hearing any support, is going to just dig them deeper into probably depression and self-loathing and doubt and shame and all of these things that are never going to help them liberate themselves out of that. And so I wanted to kind of bridge into the sexual violence, because one of the most underreported forms of violence, I would say, is sexual assault. And gosh, speaking of Blake Lively, right? We're still getting all of the details there, right? But Blake Lively says she's experienced sexual violence and harassment in some form. And we just want to shut that down immediately. We do not want to face that could have happened. And this happens all the time. I love that you brought up celebrities, because that's where we see it on the stage. And so when we see all of these women, I mean, I'm not going to get political. When we have leadership that has had literally not just accusations, but actual litigation against them for sexual violence, and we still say, oh, but you can be leadership. What does that say to the victims and survivors whose voices aren't heard, who get swept under the rug? And that is one of the biggest things that I think continues to keep people silent. And I do just want to caveat, boys, girls, men, women, everyone, non-binary people, stuck in this we can't say anything. And so with sexual violence, that seems to be the messiest, and it's the most personal too, in many ways.
Yes. And I would really love to bring up this statistic, and I apologize because I don't remember the exact number, but the amount of individuals who actually falsely accuse another individual of perpetrating sexual assaults is less than any other crime. It's less than any other crime. Now, I do want to share too, right, though, that we can hold 2 truths in our hands at once, right? So, especially as a white woman in this space, I absolutely understand the severe harm that has been done, particularly by white women who have falsely accused, particularly Black men, of sexual assaults that has led to death and serious injury, right? So I don't want to gloss over that fact. That is so serious and so important, right? That false allegations of sexual assault have been used historically and currently to demonize the Black community. And we can't gloss over that fact. And we also can hold the truth that it is the least lied or falsely accused crime.
Well, as somebody who's experienced said crime and has tried to come forward and just get immediately shut down, right? It makes sense why so few people do speak up, and why people wouldn't try to over lie about that, because they're not going to be taken seriously anyway. But, that is when we reduce things down to just like, oh, well, it's just false reports. Like, I love that you shared. It really is. It's like, I don't remember the statistic either, but I know it's like under 10%. I think it's literally under 5%. It's like
2%. I think it's around 2%.
Yeah, it's a really low number. I remember being like really surprised about it. But the number of unreported sexual assault and abuse cases way outnumber the ones that are even reported.
Absolutely. And a lot of people don't want to report. Usually a lot of that data is coming from law enforcement agencies. So somebody who's reported to law enforcement to start an investigation. A lot of people don't want to do that. They don't feel comfortable doing that, right? So we are missing a large survivor population who has not said or reported their abuse, right? And so that statistic is probably even a lot tinier.
Yeah.
Reality.
One of the things that I continue to this day, I still work with survivors of trauma and a lot of sexual assault victims and survivors, like a ton. And it's so pervasive and so common. It's like I practically can't get a client who hasn't touched on that in some way in their lifetime. Yeah. And it's shocking, it's heartbreaking, and at the same time, a lot of them downplay it. And they're like, oh, well, it wasn't really sexual abuse or sexual assault. This is a conversation I have all the time where I hear stories like, well, I didn't outright say no once it was happening, so it's not assault. And I'm like, that is not true.
And this is where like macro social work and like advocacy is so important, because can I say the S word? Shit.
We swear on this program all the time. It's the shadow side. We do not avoid anything. So go for it.
The really, really shitty thing, I'm just going to be honest, is that there's a lot of laws.
Yes.
That do say explicitly somebody has to say no or push or like have a physical reaction. And that is so not the case.
Yeah.
Like in reality, when you actually look at what usually happens, just in the fight or flight mode, when a victim is experiencing assaults, a lot of people completely freeze, and therefore actively saying no or physically pushing somebody off is literally not a possibility.
Yeah.
It's not something somebody can do. And fight or flight, freeze or fawn, which are all responses to trauma or to something serious happening. It's like it's a nervous system response, which I'm sorry, Safrianna, you can say more, probably a lot more eloquently than I am now. That's unconscious. We are not actively saying, I'm going to fight this person when I'm in this mode, or I'm going to freeze when I'm in this mode. No, we don't have control over that. It just automatically happens.
Yeah.
And so a lot of our laws are not trauma informed. And that's why advocacy is political advocacy is so important.
Well, and on that legal definition piece too, I don't know where this applies in what states, but I do know that sexual assault is sometimes literally defined legally as a man and a woman, and then it has to involve like a penetrative assault. And there's all kinds of other assaults that can happen.
I was going to bring up also, Caroline and Safrianna, that the laws are so important and the definition is so important. I'm currently taking a Women and Gender in the U.S. history class, and just learning about the history of the definition of rape and how difficult it really was to get somebody prosecuted for sexual assault or rape back then, and like looking at today and seeing how, we're not really that far off than we were, 200 years ago. So like Caroline said, the macro piece and just advocating for better definitions, more wide definitions, and better laws that make survivors feel like if they go to law enforcement, they won't be shut down and they will be believed, which I think is another huge part of it, is the law enforcement culture, which I think is another great thing that Hartley House does with the Frederick County Police Department, is that we have kind of a partnership. And I think Caroline can kind of speak better to it than I can. But as far as I know, if there is like an intimate part or any situation that Hartley House can help with and the police are called, they are supposed to report or refer the person to Hartley House, correct?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So that would be the city and the county police.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Yes, yeah. And specifically as it relates to intimate partner violence, actually in the state of Maryland, one researcher, I'm blanking on her name, I so apologize, but she actually created something called the lethality assessment.
Mm-hmm.
That is a set of questions that actually can very accurately depict if a survivor or victim will be injured, harmed, or unfortunately murdered by
Mhm.
their abuser. And it is very accurate. And so, and
Mhm.
again, it originated from a researcher in Maryland. And so that is an assessment that all law enforcement in Frederick County and the city use when called to any type of intimate partner violence situation. And then they are supposed to connect that victim or survivor with Hartley House in the moment. But I think it's also important to note too that a lot of people don't want to call the police. That's
Mm-hmm.
not a safe space for them as well. So I'll be honest with you, that is a way in which we are missing a lot of people, right? Who are at that intersection of being a victim, but also don't feel comfortable calling the police.
Mm-hmm.
And in a lot of ways, it can be a what we would consider like a hidden population, right? Where because the culture at large blames the victim, shames the victim, they don't necessarily want to come forward, they don't want to go to law enforcement. It can be really hard to say, no, I promise you we're a safe space. Please call us, right? We're not going to judge you. We're not going to blame you. We're not going to shame you because it is not your fault. It's never a survivor's fault, the experience that they've gone through, whether it be domestic violence, child abuse, intimate partner violence, sexual assaults, sexual violence, right? Even when the laws don't necessarily say, right, or are on the side of the survivor, we know it is abuse. We know that sexual violence is not this small little definition that is often used. It is any unwanted sexual contact.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we are going to treat any survivor, regardless of what they've gone through, that way. We're not going to look at it from the lens of what the legal definition is. We are looking at it at the lens of, was it sexual violence to you? If it was, you are a survivor, right? And we are going to help you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need support, right? Because again, all forms of violence are awful, and physical violence and sexual violence leave a very deep imprint in the body. Of course, emotional violence and financial, all of that can, but when we lose that sanctity of our body, we feel like we don't have our sovereignty anymore, that our literal physical boundaries have been violated. It is so hard to lean back into self-love and trust for so many people. And yeah, legal definitions be damned. Consent is key. And if you didn't want something, you didn't want something. And that should be enough to get support and validation that something was not okay.
Absolutely. 100%.
Yeah. So getting into this illegal territory and working with law enforcement, I want to go into the last thing that Hartley House supports survivors and victims of, which is human trafficking. And I know that the human trafficking portion of Hartley House was just kind of coming online when I left. It was like in transition. And oh my gosh, like the reality of it was so shocking that it really, like, it's everywhere. And what shocks me about human trafficking, again, is how normalized it is, and that we literally have celebrities that do it and get away with it, and have these whole interconnected networks of other celebrities that are literally running like underground slave trade is ultimately, like, I'm just going to be blunt. That's what human trafficking pretty much is. It's a modern day slave trade where human beings are treated as not that, but objects to be passed around. And this is the one type of violence I have not personally experienced. I almost experienced it, but somehow fortunately dodged that one.
Okay.
But so I don't have the personal, like, in my system impact of what that must be, but I can only imagine how absolutely, like, world breaking that is for people. So I'm curious to hear, what you all work with, how you've supported and so on.
Absolutely. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I just first wanted to say that I think a big thing about human trafficking that needs to be talked about first is just how many misconceptions there are about human trafficking. Like, a lot of people think that, someone has to be taken from America or somewhere else to another country or another state. But, human trafficking can just happen within Frederick County or within your city. It doesn't have to cross any state lines or, country borders. It really can happen where you live. So I just think that that's an important thing to kind of set up for people because there are so many misconceptions about that.
Yeah, thank you.
To that point as well, Natalie, and something that Hartley House is trying to just bring awareness to and education on is that actually we typically don't associate slavery with human trafficking. And the reason for that, though, is because in the US, when we think of chattel slavery, right, the slave trade where we were, and by we, I mean a lot of white Americans at the time were taking people from Africa, bringing them across the Atlantic into mainly the South and East Coast, right? And usually that brings with it images of traveling, of being chained, of being sold, right? Because that's exactly what happened. But we see that while that does sometimes happen in the US, a majority of the times human trafficking does look like somebody's being trafficked by their neighbor. Somebody's being trafficked by their intimate partner in their own house, right? And a lot of times, a lot of survivors may not even realize that what they're going through is human trafficking because oftentimes there is this idea of that it looks like chattel slavery. And that's not necessarily true, right? Again, that absolutely does happen. I know a survivor where that did happen, right? So it's not to say that that doesn't happen in the US, but more often than not, it kind of is like the song Fancy by Reba, if you've heard of it before. And I know that sounds really odd, but in the song Fancy, it's actually a really good depiction of what human trafficking often looks like in the United States. And for those who are not a Reba or country fan, or maybe have never heard Reba before, she's a country singer. And she has this song, I think it was out in the 80s or 90s. So I'm talking way back. But it's this story where she is a young woman. I shouldn't say woman. She's a teenager at the time on the verge of turning 18. And she lives with her mom and her young baby sister. And they are in a very, very, very difficult situation. The mom can't work. CPS is being called for neglect, and her mom is going to lose the youngest sister, the child. They can't afford their bills. Things are being turned off. Water, electricity is being turned off. They're just in a really, really, really difficult situation. They can't get food. They can't get access to all of the basic needs. And then the mom says, Fancy, which is the name of the main character in the song, I'm going to buy you a dress and you're going to go downtown to these fancy clubs and where these fancy business owners go. And you're going to treat them right or whatever. I forget the exact language she uses, but basically saying, I'm going to support you in human trafficking is what it is, right? Again, born out of a really, really difficult situation, but that's what it is. And as soon as Fancy turns 18, she then is engaging in sex work, but she doesn't want to, right? And that's a big conception there too. A lot of people assume that all sex work is human trafficking. That's not the case either. If somebody's over the age of 18 and they're consenting to sex work, that is not human trafficking. Now, if somebody is 17 or younger and they're engaging in any commercial sex work, that is automatically considered trafficking because somebody can't consent to that if they're under the age of 18. But anyway, regardless, the song Fancy by Reba is a really good depiction of what abuse often looks like in the US. And the top three main relationships between a human trafficker and the trafficked victim is a intimate partner, a family member, and a job listing that is not accurate. Right. So we see this a lot with escort services. Oh, you're just going to escort these people. We're not asking for any sexual favors of that nature. But then when somebody actually gets into the job, they're forced to perform any type of commercial sex work that they haven't consented to. So it makes it trafficking,
Yeah. Yeah, the nuances here. Natalie, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that human trafficking, and honestly, all of the different types of power-based violence that Hartley House serves, they're all just so interconnected and overlapping. And so if you know somebody who has gone through one of these things, they probably or may have gone through another one of these things. I was just kind of going to touch on the point that it is a lot of the time between an intimate partner, and that a lot of these things can happen within the human trafficking, intimate partner violence, financial abuse, all of these things. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to point out that it is all so nuanced and interconnected.
Yes. Thank you for speaking to that. And yeah, and I do want to just jump back to Caroline's point about the sex work versus human trafficking, because again, takeaway from today, consent is key. And there are some very empowered people out there that choose to go into sex work, and I cheer them on as long as it feels good and aligned in their body and soul. That's what we're looking for. But one can't be trafficked and it be aligned with their body and soul, because it's against their will. They're being forced into survival mode by a situation, by another person that leaves them feeling powerless. And so Hartley House, right, is the place, or whatever your local agency is that does work around these things. You can go online and you can search for domestic violence or human trafficking and like your local area and see if there is a shelter, a counseling center. And as we said at the beginning, like you can call Hartley House to have them kind of help you. Because I remember you guys had lists like of all the Maryland counties. There's some big national organizations and things that people can be referred to. But empowering yourself to get that support is the first step.
Yes. Absolutely. Yes. So on the national level, there is the human trafficking hotline, which is on the national level in the United States. There's RAIN, RAIIN. I think it stands for rape, incest, something. It's all about sexual violence. So they have a hotline and a chat line as well if you've experienced sexual violence. And then there's the National Network Against Domestic Violence as well, which also has, I think it's called the hotline for short, but they also have a hotline. And I believe they have a text line as well. And then child abuse, again, because a lot of it is with CPS. I'm not sure if there's necessarily a national child abuse hotline, so I apologize for that. But if you have experienced child abuse and you are looking for resources in your area, our hotline is a great opportunity for that. And that is 301-662-8800.
Thank you for
that. I have memorized.
Hey, I'm sure that unfortunately you have to give it out a lot. And that's the thing. At the end of the day, I'm so glad that there are people like you that are doing this work to prevent it from being as common as it is, because it is pervasive. These forms of violence are so pervasive. We don't talk about it nearly enough. And until we talk about it ad nauseum forever, until people are sick of hearing it and they stop doing what they're doing, right? We have to keep fighting for a better way. So I'm so appreciative to the both of you for the work that you're doing. And is there anything else that you want to leave our listeners with today as we wrap up here?
I just want to say, this went by so quickly. So I very much appreciate the amazing conversation and back and forth. But one thing that we didn't touch upon that I think would be really important to talk about is that in Frederick County alone, and again, we are a small county in like the northwestern side of Maryland, and our child trafficking navigator, who works with those who are 24 years old and younger, right? So not all of the human trafficking cases we see. I think they have a perpetual caseload of about 60 people. So
which is wild.
Human trafficking happens in Frederick County. It happens everywhere in the United States, right? And so I think a lot of times people think, oh, I don't need to learn about that. It doesn't happen here. Unfortunately, it does. And that's not us even talking about labor trafficking. We're just talking about the sex trafficking, right? Labor trafficking is also a big issue in the United States, often often found in the agricultural business as well. So especially if you live around any farms or agricultural businesses and workers, I'm not saying anything bad about the farmers. Please, 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 these small family farmers, I'm not saying anything about them please, or anything bad, but it is important to know that the agricultural business and labor trafficking do go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
And I also just wanted to say thank you so much. This was such a wonderful opportunity. And I guess the thing that I just want people to know is, there is help out there for you. And for those not going through this, just keep your eyes and ears open and be willing to listen and be a support to those around you.
Yes, thank you for that. Listen to survivors, listen to the stories of people. If they're bringing up a story, there's a reason behind it.
Mm-hmm.
If they're seeking support, don't shut them down, right? One of my famous slogans is "We rise together," because that's the truth. And we need to rise together. We need to support one another, and we need to rebuild communities. So thank you again for all that you do individually, and to Hartley House for all that they do to support building community and helping people be in healthier relationships. Thank you both so much for being here. Thank you to everyone who listened today, whether live or in the replay. And may the world be a more loving place, bit by bit, day by day.
And you all can do that.
You can do that. We believe in you. Yeah. And know that
we'll be doing it too. We're not hypocrites.
All right. So until next time, my friends, I'm Safrianna Luna. This has been an episode of The Shadow Side. And I love you. I see you. I believe you. And I'm cheering you on. Bye for now. That brings us to the end of this conversation today. Thanks for being brave enough to walk in the shadows with me. If you found value in this episode, please consider subscribing to Shadow Side with Safrianna wherever you listen to your podcasts, and leave a review to help others find the space of transparency and expansion. You can also connect with me at safrianna.com or livinglunas.com for more information. Until next time, know I'm loving you fiercely and cheering you on.